All right. Kevin, I believe in particular, had mentioned reclassification possibilities before we started to record. And Todd B was asking the same thing about whether you guys see any 2021 commits reclassifying to 2020.
I don't know the upside there. I mean, I get it that if you're in a state that's not playing high school football this year, and we've seen we've seen the state of Virginia come out and say they're not going to have it. Texas, the UIL is going to have an announcement on Monday. Michigan and Pennsylvania both come out and said, barring serious changes, they plan to proceed this year. Yeah, it'd be great to get these guys on campus, get them going within the strength and conditioning program, get them inside of the system. I mean, if a player is good enough, you're not going to have them for 4 or 5 years anyway, but you're really starting that clock early. But, I don't see anybody that seems to be right there on that point. They're going to have a lot of January enrollees, but I don't know if anybody's just going to forego their senior season, because you got to remember, too, you've got to hit all of the points to get through the eligibility center, formerly known as the clearinghouse, to be able to do that. It's not even just a matter of being able to clear your school district's standards for graduation. You have to have X amount of credits in certain subject matters and whatnot to be able to get through the clearinghouse or the eligibility center. And while they've taken great steps this year to make this year more workable because of the online learning and things along those points, I don't think we're going to see them just forego credits at this point. So if you haven't been taking summer courses and things of that nature, it's going to be very difficult for players to reclassify.
There's also the fact that if somebody were to reclassify in Ohio State's class, Ohio State would have to cut 2 players on the current roster because they're still sitting at like 86 players, 86 scholarship players. So they don't have room. From what I've been told, Ohio State's not looking at having anybody reclassify. I think they still have to figure out who is not returning. CJ Saunders is still waiting on that 6th year, and he would be number 86. So, there's no room for him if they wanted to right now.
Right, Seibert, the specialist. We have 86 right now with Saunders out and Seibert in. So it would be easy to gray shirt to delay the enrollment of Seibert for a year, but Saunders would have them at 86. So one way or the other, as Tony said, they still have to make some decisions in terms of getting to 85 by the magic date on the calendar. And for everybody worried about, well, what happens if they don't? No program ever has tried to go in with more scholarships than they're allowed to have, and I don't expect anybody to ever try and find out what those penalties are.
Todd B asking about TEGRA TSHABOLA, who is the 16th rated offensive tackle in the country in the 2022 class out of Westchester, Ohio. That's number 16 in the country, number 144. That's according to the composite of 247, Rivals, and I believe ESPN. I always was curious about the rankings being adjusted considerably during off season. Obviously, there are camps and other ways to evaluate these players, but you guys have any insight into 2022? Man, I don't know how you guys keep up with just evaluating what just happened in 2020, let alone 2021's coming in, of course, is the number 1 class in the nation. And then out to 2022, these kids that have played a sophomore season in high school.
Well, Rivals didn't drop TEGRA, but we don't have them as a top 100 player currently. We should put out our first numerical rankings in August, is what I'm being told. We'll see. We're in unique times. I did have the opportunity to see TEGRA at a camp in Obetz this last week. Impressive looking kid. I don't know how we can have a ton of movement right now where there's just such an uneven amount of camps. And by that uneven amount, I mean very few. We like to call it the underwear Olympics, is really what it kind of is when they're going around. And at the camp I saw them at, there wasn't even one-on-one competition because they were maintaining social distancing in small groups and never really had more than 9 players in a group. So, it's difficult. But a lot of times I tell people when there is movement in the rankings, it isn't because your favorite player is moving down per se, especially this early. It's a matter of we're getting more information on other players and they just may be moving up. So not everything out there is some conspiracy to move a guy down. It's just maybe a correction in the rankings with other players who we've had an opportunity to see. And it's like, well, this guy probably fits here in the rankings or whatever, and everybody who's beneath him is going to slide down a spot. So, I mean, again, I can't speak for other rankings, but that's generally how things work.
In terms of will he climb back up the charts, I mean, he's going to have the opportunity, because we're not just going to base everything on what has happened to this point. I mean, more things will happen, be it camps or the 2020 season, or even a 2021 season. So there's still plenty of time. And if he's as good as people think, then he'll be in the top 100, top 200, whatever, and he'll climb back up. So I wouldn't getting upset about stuff. I mean, we've seen so many guys in Ohio who are top 100 guys with the early releases, who fall way out of the top 500 and never get a sniff from Ohio State because they were ranked too high. I don't think that's the issue here, but we're so far out from December of 2021 that he's going to have plenty of opportunities to move up.
Just remember, Mo Wells was the number 3 player overall in his class in the first rankings, according to Rivals.com. And while I think that he was miscast as a running back, he would have been better off as a defensive back, coming out of Jacksonville Sandalwood High School. Again, it just goes to show that the early rankings, they move the needle in terms of getting subscribers happy and everything else. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't bet the farm on the first rankings that I see.
Steve, TEGRA TSHABOLA, 16th rated offensive tackle, according to the composite. News on him.
Yeah, while I was on my little brief sojourn there, I did get a text from somebody within our network, and this is what they said. That at least our network had dropped him some when they watched video, or they had dropped him some, and then they watched video from the showcase this past weekend and thought that he looked a little slow and less athletic than what they thought he was. And he was also maybe a little bit out of shape, at least 10 pounds too heavy. But I don't find that to be that troubling for a kid who is just going into his junior year of high school. He's still 16 years old. His body will be remade 3 times before he plays a meaningful down at Ohio State. So to me, I don't consider that to be that big of a negative. So, it's all beauty in the eye of the beholder. And when you have his kind of frame, I think Corey Stringer fought his weight a lot of times, and that's a way back reference, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of that same type of frame. And he still was an All-American and played in the NFL for over a decade. So to me, I don't worry too much about that.